Lawmakers cite rising landlord-tenant disputes, growing poverty, and unfair hikes as justification. State legislatures in Ebonyi and Delta have initiated legislative processes to regulate rent in a bid to protect tenants from exploitation and address the growing housing crisis suffered by middle-income earners. In Ebonyi State, the House of Assembly has begun action on a bill titled "The Bill for a Law to Control the Rent, Residential and Business Premises in Ebonyi State and Other Matters Connected Therewith." The bill, introduced by Governor Francis Nwifuru, passed its first reading on Friday. Leaders of the House, Kingsley Ikoro, who moved the motion for a second reading, described the bill as people-oriented and timely, noting that many court cases in the state arise from landlord-tenant disputes. Meanwhile, in Delta State, the House of Assembly announced a similar move to control rent hikes through a bill titled "A Bill to Regulate House Rent in Delta State." According to a statement from the state government, the bill, sponsored by House Leader Honorable Emeka Nwaobi and 27 others, has been listed for its first reading. Speaker Right Honorable Imomotimi Guwo said the bill is a direct response to widespread complaints, especially from urban centers such as Asaba, Warri, Sapele, and Ugeli. Both states have signaled a commitment to ensuring housing becomes more affordable and that tenants' rights are protected. Citizens in both regions now look cautiously optimistic towards the outcomes of the legislative review. So last week on the show, we had guests, we had a similar news, and my guest hammered on how difficult renting has now become in Nigeria. For starters, before I get your thoughts on the story, I want to give you a back report on what, getting an apartment has now become. First, for starters, a landlord's move to tell you your rent has been increased by 100%. Increasing the rent by 100% in an apartment where you have probably stayed for 5 years. Now, when that is done, there is no change of infrastructure, there is no rebranding of the building, there is no renovation of any kind, same as it's always been, but bills have been increased to 100%. Now, moving away from that rent structure, those guests on that show also made us to realize, highlighted key points where they said that now the agents now even tell the landlords how much to charge for their apartments, right? All of this, we have a self-contained apartment in a place like Port Harcourt right now, going as high as 700, 800, 1.5 million. Minimum wage is still stayed at 70,000. What are your thoughts on this report?
Conventionally, I am not a fan of, government regulating the price of goods and services.
Okay.
However, housing is very critical. Like you have rightly pointed out, in a system where minimum wage is 70,000, and question is how many people are even covered under this minimum wage. There are a whole lot of people who are not even under the minimum wage, and even those who earn, and beyond the rent is also how we pay for rent. Some time ago, Lagos State government was attempting to make a bill, I don't know how far they have gone with that, to reduce the yearly and the annual rent payment to monthly payment.
Do you think that would be a more sustainable approach?
I think so. It will reduce pressure on people. I mean, in all other crimes, people pay monthly, and in some places even weekly. At least I've seen some rents in the UK, they pay monthly, and something like that. So it really doesn't make sense where you earn monthly and you are to pay yearly. I mean, if you're to pay yearly, it should be your choice so that you can do it and face other good things. But if you're to pay monthly, you can easily put it in perspective. At the end of the month, you bring out whatever you have to pay. So the pressure of looking for that box sum, it's taken away from you. Then I think that's one key area where the regulation should go in beyond the fixing the price of the rent. And then also issues like in Port Harcourt here, we have issues like for new tenants, you're coming in, the landlord is asking you for money for drink. Those are crazy things that should
the money for drink is now 100,000.
Those are crazy things that should be thrown off the window. Why should I pay you money for drink?
We also have paying of rent for 2 years.
Yeah, am I coming to marry your daughter or something? So why am I paying for drink? I mean, it's a mutually benefiting business. It benefits you because it's your business. It benefits me because it gives me shelter. Why should I give you drink, I have paid for the apartment. Then you have the agent, so many things, agreement fee, legal fees. Why should I've always wondered, and maybe I need to be schooled on it too. I've always wondered, why should I be the one to pay the legal fee for the landlord? You contacted a lawyer, which is fine, but the responsibility of paying your lawyer should be on you, not me. So why should, some of all these unreceived money, because we just talk about the rent, but there's so many other things at times.
Right.
Even comes close to almost the same amount. Maybe you are paying for an accommodation, like you said, maybe a 2-bedroom for 1 million, 1.2. By the time you pay this or that things, you're getting to 2 million. That means you have done over 50% of unreceived money. You're paying for drink, you're paying for, I think those are things that ideally should be looked into, either by legislation or by convention and agreement. If there's a way we can do it, maybe for a start the legislation may work, may be fine. Rather than beyond making the legislation, how are they going to implement it? Now, I'm not trying to say it's impossible to implement, because I remember years ago in Lagos as a child, the then military government of Marwa introduced the rent edict.
Okay.
Of course, that was a military government, and he regulated the payments of, then it was crazy. Some landlords were taking 3 years, 4 years in Lagos then, but with that edict, they came down to 1 year, and even the rent dropped. So it's very practical. It's very possible to implement. But then, beyond this implementation, reducing the rent, since it's a democratic system, I would also like a system where before the government go ahead and make this law, there should be more like a town hall meeting, a meeting with the landlords. Let's even hear them. What justification do you have to increase the rent? I understand the rate of inflation is high, but a property that has been existing for 10, 20 years ago, and you didn't carry out any renovation, and you plan no renovation, why are you increasing the rent? Because of the increase in bag of cement. I know you may want to increase to reflect, certain economic realities, especially as concern you, but not with that argument that a bag of cement or building materials is so, because this is an old building and you're not planning any renovation.
Right.
In fact, since you built it, you have not done any maintenance. The tenant still bears the burden of maintaining it.
Right.
But most importantly, beyond this legislation and the emotions and all that, let's look at the economic side of it. Beyond making laws, the government would be more pro people if they make sincere effort to have a multiplication of housing, a good housing policies. Maybe a situation where already you have a system that says every land in a state belongs to the government. How about government using their good office to make some of those lands available, not necessarily for free, but available for a planned housing policy, mass housing policy, not some of this elitist housing system that is done. Because in some places the government that is trying to regulate housing, when they build their houses are also very expensive. So if you do your own building and it's expensive, why do you want the landlord to get a cheaper thing? But look at, for example, in Lagos State, in the days of Jakonde, and I think that Second Republic is about the only time we had governors who were pro-masses. After then, all the governors seems to be elitist in their thinking. Jakonde did massive pro-people, low-income housing estates almost everywhere. And some of those estates are still existing. So if our government can have, unfortunately, even the political parties you have now that take over power, most of them have no, clearly defined housing policy. But if you have these things, and you have a way of either directly building houses, mass-oriented housing policies, not some elitist housing policies that you build some bungalows and sell it to high-earning politicians and those in that category. No, for people, houses that you have the ordinary person in mind. You make it, if you have these houses, and also maybe make friendly mortgages available, eliminate some of the challenges people have in acquiring land. Because if you say you want to buy land to build on, you also have issues of community persons to deal with. Like in a place like Lagos, I don't know how much of that operates in Lagos. For each trip of sand you drop, somebody is somewhere to collect money from you. All these things build up into increasing the cost of things. Then the building materials are expensive. If government is here from the federal level, maybe even reduce some of the tariffs on imported building materials, and even see how some of these things can be manufactured locally. And where they're manufactured locally, also see that the price will be better. For example, cement is manufactured locally, but the price is not any friendly. But maybe if government encourage a mass production of these things, you know, production of building materials, cement inclusive, that is make it competitive, not a monopoly. We may have a price crash in building materials. When you have that price crash, the Shylock landlords will have reduced reason to make an argument that building material is high. Then, like I said, government have a housing policy, maybe mortgage, that, you know, when you take a loan, the payment period can be spanned. So remove also the argument that, if how long will it take me to recover my money? If the money you used to build it is so that you got a mortgage plan and the payment plan is spanned over a 10-year, 20-year period, you will have less issues to complain about. So it needs a holistic approach, not just a stopgap measure. It needs to be looked holistically. Government needs to up its game in its policy. A very good housing policy can reduce this thing. When you have all these policies, many more people can build. You can build, I can build. You know, mid-income earners, how do I put it now? Mid-income earners, high-income earners, even the low-income earners can build. You know, just I'm looking for this word now. Not just the middle-class people can afford house. Then, like we used to have in the past, some companies and governments also had their housing estate. If you go to Lagos, you still have places like Federal Government College Janiki, they have their housing estate. You know, by the time you take off some of those stuff, for example, if you have 2-3 federal government you know, colleges and that have houses in Port Harcourt here, by the time you take away their staff, the houses they would have occupied will remain vacant for another person to take in. If you go to places like the universities, if they have house enough to accommodate their lecturers and some of their staff, wherever those guys you are living in the town would be left open for other people. So naturally, when the law of supply and demand plays in, we would have reduced prices without even government doing much in terms of regulation. So I think it's more of a housing policy than even just this regulation. As much as we welcome this regulation as a stopgap measure, but government should look at the larger picture, have a housing policy, have a civil servant housing policy, encourage some of the big companies to have housing program for their staff. You know, things will be much more better.
Thank you so much for your insight.